All right, this is Mrs. Velting, and this is Nutrition Basics Lesson 1. Nutrition is a science. It's the study of our relationship with food based on like the foods that we eat, the foods that we choose, our emotional relationship with food, and it's also the study of the relationship between food and disease or food and nutrition risk, and how our diet affects our risk of disease or our treatment of disease as well. Maslow stated that people are motivated to achieve certain needs and that some needs take precedence over others. So this is a chart representing that. Our most basic need is for physical survival, and so food is a part of that. And that motivates our behavior. So once that level is fulfilled, so if you look at the level in red, then the next level up is what motivates us, and so on. Also, the need to fulfill the needs will become stronger the longer the duration that they're denied. So for example, the longer a person goes without food, the more hungry he or she will become, is the idea there. There are different things that affect our health choices. We can make positive lifestyle choices or negative or poor lifestyle choices that can affect us one way or the other. For example, I make lunch for my family the night before. So my kids go to school and my husband goes to work, and because I like to cook, I make our lunches. And I usually try to do those the night before and have them all ready to go. And then our mornings go much smoother. So that's a choice that I make that enhances our life. And that seems like such a small thing, but it has this real domino effect for the rest of the day. Because then in the morning, because I have really young kids, in the morning, the day doesn't start as hectic. And then we have kind of a smoother start. And we're usually then on time, which then I'm not upset or angry or irritated, and neither are they. And so when they get to school, they have a more positive start when they get there as well. So regarding poor lifestyle choices, let's say if all of my coworkers tend to go to fast food for lunch on the lunch break. Fast food is high in saturated fats and high in calories, and saturated fats and trans fats are inflammatory fats for the body as well. And so that puts me at greater risk of developing heart disease in the future, for example, or even just the idea that I'm eating more calories. Sometimes a fast food meal can be up to 2,000, 2,500 calories in one meal, and that's perhaps all I need in one day. So that can cause obesity long term. So those are different ways that we can make either a positive choice or a poor lifestyle choice that can affect our health risks. As childhood educators, it's important to take responsibility for our own health, because children really learn a lot from what they see us doing. Not so much what we say, but what they see us doing, and as we model behaviors, good behaviors or bad behaviors. It's important to make them aware of the benefits of positive health choices. If you make this choice, for example, if I'm talking to a 5-year-old, if you go ahead and get dressed right now before we have dinner, then you'll have time for a game with me and Daddy afterwards, if you're already ready for bed. So just little things like that, and that's more in relation to behaviors than diet, but there's lots of different ways to model good behavior. You could let kids see you eating breakfast or taking a walk after lunch, drinking water as opposed to drinking pop or sodas. Those are ways that we can model good behavior as well. And those seem like just little things, but for kids, they see us doing that, and then it makes them want to eat vegetables, for example, or eat fruit at a meal. There are different things that influence our food choices. Taste is probably the most influential. If we don't like the taste of something, we're not likely to keep eating it, even if it's really healthy. And man, I really want to follow this special diet, but I just do not like the taste of this particular shake that I'm supposed to eat on this special diet, for example. We also have certain habits that we can get into. Like I mentioned, the fast food, going for fast food at lunch, that's a habit that perhaps I've gotten into, or maybe a routine of always going a certain way, or following, going out to lunch with my coworkers as opposed to bringing my own lunch. Education also influences us. So the more that I learn about different nutrients in foods, I learn that potatoes have potassium and fiber, and soluble fiber and insoluble fiber, and we'll learn about fibers later, but a potato is very nutritious. Or even if I were to make my own potato wedges for my kids or for myself, as opposed to going out and eating French fries. French fries have a lot of other additives. They're very refined food, and they're not nutrient dense, and not the same thing as eating a potato. And not everybody knows that. So that's something that as health professionals, and as you soon will be, you may take that for granted, but not everyone is aware of that. There are different types of foods in relation to nutrition, or like health conscious foods. So some people call them modified foods. You could also call them enriched foods. There are functional foods that possess other benefits other than just their typical nutrient content. So for example, oatmeal might be recommended to a mom that's a nursing mother, nursing a baby, because oatmeal can help with milk production. Fermented foods contain good bacteria that's really helpful for our digestion. Fermented foods also have fiber, so that is good for our overall digestive process. Modified foods, as I mentioned, there's enriched, and then there's fortified foods also. They could be enriched with vitamins and minerals. Say, for example, orange juice is enriched with calcium often, and that amount of calcium is not going to be found in an orange if you were to eat an orange. And then there's, there's fortified foods, where it would be the example of the calcium in orange juice. And then enriched foods is when vitamins or minerals are added back in because processing has removed those things. So there are different ways of providing nutrition with food other than just in the food itself. There's also something called functional fiber, where fiber is taken from plant foods and added supplemental to foods where maybe it wouldn't be that high amount of fiber, like those Fiber One bars or different cereals where they add extra fiber. That could be good, and sometimes it can be detrimental if it causes someone to have gas or bloating. Sometimes that can be uncomfortable. So there are different ways to describe nutrients. Our body does make some nutrients for us. So there are food sources, but then we also produce some nutrients. But overall, we think of nutrients in foods as providing us with energy or different structural components, helping us with growth and maintenance of the body, reducing risk of some diseases. We know that a high plant-based diet helps with decreasing our risk of certain cancers. There's a whole library in the Lax Cancer Center at St. Mary's Hospital where they have dedicated information about how a high plant-based vegetable, especially vegetable diet, high in phytonutrients, can help you with preventing cancer from returning or preventing cancer if it runs in your family. So that's a really interesting thing that we know about vegetables now and how good they are for us. There's also essential nutrients, which means we need to obtain them from food sources because our body either can't produce them or can't produce them in the quantities we need. So as I said before, our body does produce some nutrients like vitamin D, sometimes called the sunshine vitamin. So we get UV rays from the sun, and with the help of cholesterol in our body, we produce vitamin D. And with the help of good bacteria in our intestines, we make vitamin K, which helps with blood clotting, among other things. So that's pretty interesting. There are 6 different classes of nutrients: carbohydrates, proteins, fats, vitamins and minerals, and then water. Only 3 of those actually provide energy. Vitamins and minerals and water help us use that energy. So water is sort of the medium in which nutrients can pass through our cell walls or be transported throughout the body. Vitamins and minerals, especially like, say, for example, B vitamins, help us use the calories that we're eating for energy, as opposed to just storing that energy as fat, which is what can happen if we're not getting the nutrients we need in our diet. So the energy yielding nutrients are carbohydrates, protein, and fat, this first column here, and they need to be replenished daily. Vitamins and minerals also need to be replenished daily. They don't yield any energy, but they do help us use the energy and release the energy from our food. And then water, as I said before, is the medium in which those processes can take place. So more specifically, we can call energy in our food calories. Kilocalories is correct, or you could say calories with a C, or kcals. Any way you were to write it, say for an answer or in our discussion boards, would be correct. I want you to remember that protein and carbohydrate both contain 4 calories per gram. So if I'm holding 1 gram, weighing out 1 gram of protein, it would contain 4 calories. Fat, you can remember, has 9 calories per gram. And one other way that maybe it would help you to remember that is that fat is also, it takes a little longer to digest or break down. So fat sometimes takes the longest to leave the stomach compared to protein and carbohydrate. So maybe that's one reason why, or that would help you remember that fat has more calories per gram than protein and carbohydrate. If you guess 4 or 9, hopefully you'll get it right. But when we get to some math stuff, you'll need to have those memorized. Sometimes we describe a food based on the main nutrients in the food. So for example, chicken has fat and protein in it, but we often call it a protein source because it's high in protein. Brown rice, yes, has a lot of carbohydrates. We often will call it a carb or carbohydrate, but it also has some protein and fat. But just it's higher in the carbohydrate family, and so that's typically how we reference it. Or maybe if you've ever wondered why we reference them that way. I'm going to let you come back to this slide. I don't expect you to read it all right now, but this is an example of how to calculate the energy from food. So you would look up the different macronutrients, is what we call carbohydrates, protein, and fat. We call those macronutrients, and you can actually calculate the amount of calories that you would get from a certain portion of food. So we'll do that later in some assignments. Energy storage in the body. Any excess energy that we don't need to use, we will store. We can store glucose or sugar that we consume in our liver for later if our brain needs some energy, or we can store glucose in our muscle tissue when, say, you want to do a sprint to your next class, you need some glucose in your muscles. We also store energy as fat on the body, and that's when weight gain occurs. So we need to use our energy to fuel different metabolic pathways and our physical activity, but if we consume more energy than what our body needs, that's why more energy than what our body needs, I'll finish my thought there, then that's where weight gain can occur. So for example, if I eat a fast food meal that contains about 2,000 calories for dinner, and I didn't really eat anything the rest of all morning other than maybe a coffee, and I had all of my calories in one meal, or the majority of my calories in one meal, as opposed to spreading them throughout the day, I'm more likely to store the excess calories I consumed in that meal as fat. as opposed to being able to just like slowly use the nutrients throughout the day. I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to finish the rest in the next lesson.